Return to observing. Observing whatever there is to be observed without defining what's being observed. As soon as we define, we've gone into the observed. We're no longer the observer. The one that is everything got lost in something of his own creation. Returning to observe means to allow what's being observed and simply observe. This is the natural state. In this state, there's no pressure on the nervous system. As soon as we define, as soon as we become something in the conceptual world, then we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect the concept that we believe we are. We have to protect the definition that we chose, that we became. So this takes pressure. Pressure reduces efficiency. The organs, rather than doing what's optimal for the organism, are doing what's optimal to protect the concept that has been defined. Whether it's good for the organism or bad for the organism. Because the identity is moved into the observed. The observer became a concept of his own creation. These concepts, as subtle as they might be, are what define our experience. They define the messages our molecules are going to send to each other and the experience that's going to result biologically. The biological experience is the base of the psychological experience. The psychological experience turns back to these very subtle concepts that are running humanity. What is, the observer, doesn't move and cannot move. What's being observed is always moving. When the observer is observing, he's always safe. When he is the observed, he is never safe. Every concept has the opposite concept that exists in potential. Therefore, no concept is safe in the world of manifestation. Different ideas become extremely popular in one generation and are completely wiped from the human memory in other generations. So once we're defined as a concept, regardless of the quality of that concept, we're manifesting in a world that is filled with opposites. Existence has no opposite. Existence is what we are. In order to return to being the observer, we need to find balance physically, emotionally, and mentally. When there's no balance, then we have to define ourselves. We define ourselves as whatever relationship we have with the imbalance. That overpowers the underlying silence that is always present. And so then the observer cannot be fully accessed. The observer remains somewhat mixed with the observed until the imbalance is corrected. When there's balance, then the observed can become silent, and then the observer remains alone as the observer. The observer is the root of perception. The observer is the life force that's creating this perception. So when we come back to the observer, we're coming back to the base upon which everything exists. Everything exists within the one observing its existence, whether it's humanity and the reality that they observe and create, or the collective that formed the body that became everything that we can perceive. In that reality, there's the collective perception, the spirit that's at the root of all spirits. Spirit means a lens for existence to perceive itself. Every spirit is built upon the transparent spirit. Every spirit is a specific form, specific manifestation of how existence can perceive itself. Our entire body was created as a vehicle for perception. We don't simply perceive through our eyes, we perceive through every cell of our being. Perception is the underlying language, and within that language there's a subset called the physical reality, which is a different form that we perceive. It's something we perceive through our bodies rather than through our spirits directly. So it's still being perceived within the spirit, but the spirit is receiving a translation that the organs have created of what they interpret the environment to be. And so all this information becomes available to the one perceiving. It becomes available to be observed. And then based on the wisdom of the observer, this information can become an infinite number of things. This information will mean to every single individual something else in every single second. And this is the core of the spirit. The core of the spirit is the one that's going to decide how to translate that information. All information becomes available to the spirit. And the spirit is the one who chooses how to translate that information. So every organ is taking part in perception. Every organ is translating something physical into something spiritual. Every cell. This is the nature of biology, is that it creates a physical structure for a spiritual being. While the spiritual being is in the physical structure, the physical and the spiritual are one and the same. It's the same cells that are doing the physical translations that are also doing at the same time the spiritual translations. The two sides of the same coin. Somehow our brain physically calculates data. It physically trades information with itself through a biological language that we don't understand. And it comes to conclusions about different pieces of information that we've recorded throughout decades. It's happening physically while it's happening spiritually. It's happening at the same time. Every cell has a spiritual value as well as a physical value. We can measure the physical value, but we don't yet know how to measure the spiritual value. The spiritual values of my cells are speaking to you now. This is the information that has been created based on many sources of information that have been calculated biologically. And so this biological calculation is beyond our ability to comprehend. So it's not within the capacity of the conscious mind to understand the nature of the biology that's creating it. But we can trust the biology to do everything that it requires to do. And therefore, we can take a step back and simply observe reality as it happens. Reality as it happens because someone beyond us, beyond our conscious understanding, a life force that has the power to do so, is creating us. And we are simply observing, we're perceiving this happen in real time. And we're perceiving it making decisions. Not always do we understand those decisions. Sometimes we really disagree with those decisions, and yet we're observing, we're perceiving it happen, and it happens, and then the biological calculations continue. And so we are there to perceive. We cannot dictate how it's supposed to be. We don't know how it's supposed to be. It knows much more than we know. So we have to learn to trust it. It trusted us and gave us a lot of power. As the observer, we can get involved anywhere we feel is important and override our natural inclinations. But this doesn't mean that it's wise to do so. This is an emergency mechanism for when the conscious mind perceives immediate danger. Something can cause harm, so then it overrides. But the conscious mind is observing the perfection of the Creator. The conscious mind is not doing the heavy lifting. When the conscious mind adds drama, when the conscious mind is psychologically involved in the details, then the organism suffers. The organism wasn't designed for that type of involvement. It's like it's running in emergency mode continuously, constantly being overridden by an unnatural force. So when we return to being the observer, we're remembering the beauty of what's taking place. And we're remembering to trust what's taking place. What's taking place is creating us. What's creating us created everything. It's very good at creating. Very reliable while we're in the bodies, while we have our physical manifestation. And then when we leave beyond our physical manifestation, then we really get a taste. We really start appreciating the wonders of the one who designed life, because as long as we are in our physical manifestation, we're fooled by our senses, by the show of other people, by the things we don't understand. To have access to real information while we're still in the body is not an easy task. And so we start appreciating the wonders of the Creator much more after we see it directly, not while we see it through the lens of the impressions we have of other people. But the more we observe what's happening inside of us, the more we observe the wonder of these organs that create life, that become reality, that become the experience that we're so used to, the more we see the wonder of the Creator even in this world. This area of life, this area of reality, cannot be contaminated by the beliefs and by the chaos of the external world. So I turn to observing, to realizing the nature of perception, to realizing the unity between all the different characters that you've played in your own mind, because nobody else has ever entered. All the conversations between the different imagined people talking to you or with you, and yet really it's all your mind. There's nobody else there. All the different concepts, all the different teachings. Every meaning is yours and yours alone. The context is beyond what a human being can describe. And therefore, the meaning can never be the same. The real meaning is, how does it affect the biology that's receiving the information? That's the quantity. That's how we can quantify the experience. But the images, the emotions, the thoughts that are being stimulated will always be different. It can never be the same. And so the experience of life is a very long conversation with yourself. It's a conversation between what we're experiencing and what something inside of us knows that we should be experiencing. And somehow the Spirit is trying to close that gap. So return to that place of safety and simply allow your biological reality to take care of itself as you observe the fact that you are observing a biological reality that is beyond the understanding of any human being that ever lived. This is the true mystery, the mystery that's so obvious that nobody notices it. And within this mystery is the doorway to all the miraculous realities that humanity has ever had access to. There can be no other doorway. The doorway is your spirit, your ability to activate this biological entity that you are. And your ability to activate depends on intelligence. Intelligence is the language of the Creator. Through intelligence, you activate yourself in order to gain more access to your organs. Your organs are your capacity to be you while you're in the body. Every organ is playing its part. If the organ is playing its part appropriately, then there is balance. Then there is cooperation, then there is efficiency. Then there is the appropriate energy to create the life that is suitable to the one that dwells within. Return to your true nature. Return to your potential. By allowing yourself to be more. Allow yourself to be more by forgetting all the limitations you've placed on yourself. Allow yourself to be what you already are, so that you can discover what you are. Don't tell yourself who you are. You don't know. Allow yourself to be and find out who you are. And you are constantly changing. So even after you've allowed yourself to be, don't assume that, oh, now I figured out who I am. If you think you figured out who you are, then you've forgotten who you are. You're not something that can be figured out. You can figure out how to get along with yourself, and that's highly recommended. But you can never figure out who you are, because there's so much to you that is not yet knowable. And all the unknowable about you is extremely beautiful, extremely sweet. It's the treasure that has been prepared for future generations to discover. For our generation, there's plenty to discover as well. Our minds are capable of a lot more appreciation for our experience than we're currently having. And this appreciation is only going to grow deeper as humanity discovers who they are and how they function and what they're capable of. So return to that place of allowing by removing yourself and your preferences and your interpretations and opinions, and simply observing as the wonder continues.